everyone. We are back again with 411 with West Texas Rehab, and I have yet another special guest with me today. Hi, hello, how are you?
Hello, I'm good. I'm good. How are you?
Good. So happy to have you. Go ahead and introduce yourself to the folks.
So my name is Anna Nguyen. I am a pediatric speech pathologist at West Texas Rehab. I have been practicing at West Texas Rehab. My entire career has been there.
Wow.
So almost 7 years now.
Wow,
so,
7 years.
Yes.
That's amazing.
It is. It goes
That is
fast.
amazing. I was about to say, does it feel like 7 years?
It doesn't. It doesn't.
That is awesome. So, okay, we are talking about, April is, of course, Autism Awareness Month. So that's what we are talking about today. Let's just start at the beginning. If a parent has a concern, what do you usually tell them?
So I get approached a lot by parents whose children have been in speech therapy or even have just come for an evaluation, and they're concerned about autism because that is such a hot button issue. I think that that's something that we see so much of, and parents get so concerned about it. And so I'm kind of myself or my coworkers who are occupational therapists or physical therapists get approached with, I think my child has autism, what do I do? And so always check with your pediatrician. They're your best resource on that. Call them that day and tell them, hey, I am concerned that my child has autism. What steps do I need to take? Typically, that first step will be sending a referral to a developmental specialist. So there are pediatricians that actually specialize in child development, and so they know the ins and outs of every single step of development that a child should be doing and are able to recognize those red flags. And so always check with your pediatrician about those referrals, and they'll send those off. And then the second thing I tell them is you're doing exactly what you need to be doing by being here. So getting your child those therapy services, looking into the school district if they're old enough for that. Yeah. So that's kind of where we start with that.
Yeah, the starting point for sure. So let's say, a parent does get that confirmation. So where do they go from there? Do they see you?
So sometimes they will send referrals to us, and we'll be seeing them long before they get that diagnosis. Other times we'll get them after they receive that diagnosis. And so, we evaluate them. I would evaluate their language skills and say, okay, these are the things we need to work on. So we may get them before the diagnosis and we may get them after the diagnosis. But I try to remind parents, my plan for therapy is not going to change just because of a label. And so I'm going to do an evaluation on your child, and I'm going to say, okay, these are their strengths, these are their areas that they need help, and how can I help? So getting that diagnosis can be really flustering for parents, and they come and they say, okay, we got a diagnosis, so what are you going to do different? And I'm going to say, well, not a lot, because I've been treating your child for what they've presented with me. So that's kind of one of the things we do. And another thing I usually will recommend is a school evaluation. So for children that are 3 years old or older, they qualify for, they call it ECSE, Early Childhood Special Education. And so they do their own assessment in the school district, and then they tell them if they qualify for that program or not. And I love that program. I think that children that are able to go and have that special school experience for part of their day, and they can also still get services with us, they can do both. I've seen so much growth in my children that have done that. So
wow, that is amazing. I mean, what is that like for you, to really see all that progress?
I sometimes will have to step back, because when you're in that day-to-day, when you see a child each week and you're like, oh, okay, they're doing a little bit more, but then stepping back and saying, whoa, 6 months ago you weren't able to acknowledge that I was sitting in the room with you, and now you're coming up to me and pulling my hand towards something you want, is really, it's a cool experience that I feel like I get to be part of with them.
That is amazing. So I mean, it kind of brings up, the parents too, because they're in this process as well. I guess, what would you say to parents who are kind of frustrated and who haven't taken that step back and really looked at the progress?
Yeah, I think, with any diagnosis, there's going to be some sort of difficulty coming around to it. I mean, any diagnosis that you receive for your child is going to be hard. And so, adjusting to changing your expectations of your child and thinking, I was expecting my 10-year-old to be playing baseball and going on camping trips and things like that, but then kind of scaling that back and saying, well, that can be really hard for a parent to come to terms with that. And so I feel like my role as a therapist is not just to treat the child, but to also be a partner with their parent and say, hey, yeah, maybe they won't be ready for that, but look at this awesome thing that your child can do.
Yeah.
And so being able to kind of walk with them in those moments is hard, but it's worth it.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure they're so glad to have you, because do people kind of feel alone through this sometimes, or they can feel alone?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think right now and over the last few years, there's been such a push to have support groups.
Yeah.
There's the Autism Alliance of the Concho Valley, and I know they can have some awesome resources for parents, and connecting you with other parents who have gone through it, and then parents meeting other parents at West Texas Rehab with all of our activities we do, or meeting other parents at school with the activities they do at school. And then we also have a social worker at West Texas Rehab who is really good about helping parents connect and network, and she does a support group each month. It's not always about autism, but any parent or individual who helps people with disabilities or children with disabilities can benefit from being a part of those support groups.
Sounds like a lot of great resources out there.
There are. Our goal is to never let anyone feel like they're alone, because you're not. We're here.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so we were talking, this is Awareness Month, obviously, and that's new for a lot of people, but now they're getting the chance to learn. So what are some of those maybe misconceptions that are out there?
I jotted down a few that I wanted to address.
Yeah.
So the first one is that individuals with autism have intellectual disabilities or low IQs, and that's not correct. They might be below average, they might be average, they might be above average. The hard thing is those IQ tests, or the way we evaluate their IQ, is very language based. And so their language is different than a typically developing peer might be. And so assessing their IQ, assessing their intellect is going to be a little bit harder, but they're not, when you meet a child with autism, don't just assume that they are low, because they may not be.
Right.
So that was one. Another one that I feel very passionate about is individuals with autism have no desire to connect with peers, and that's not true at all. They have that desire, but it's just difficult for them to connect. And so I have actually read some different blog posts and things like that from adults that have autism and that are able to really verbalize well what those struggles are. And all of them across the board have said, like, we want to connect, but sometimes we don't know how, or we think we know how, and then people don't reciprocate because they're labeled as weird or quirky or different. And so recognizing that they do want to connect and kind of making that step to invite them.
Yeah.
And then the last one is about the causes of autism. Very controversial. I think you see I think we've kind of died down from a lot of that controversy over the last few years, but saying that children with autism have it because of immunizations or bad parenting or mental health difficulties, things like that. Autism is actually proven to be a neurobiological change, so their brain looks different when it is lighting up. It's lighting up in different ways in different areas. Their brain is different. The way that it works is different, and there's many factors that contribute to autism. So it's not just an immunization. It's not just bad parenting. It's not just a mental health issue. It's lots of things that kind of go into that. So those were the big three that I wanted to touch on.
Yeah, because I'm sure we've heard them all before. Whether we realized it or not, they're out there.
Right.
Wow. I'm just learning so much over here. Well,
I'm
that's
so glad.
That's the point of this month, right? Is
Yes.
to learn and to grow
Yes.
ourselves. So, wow, this is fantastic. So, what else, I guess, do you really maybe run into that you see a lot, or maybe people don't realize just about what you do?
I think acknowledging the behavioral component in autism. So I, as a speech therapist, am going to help children learn to use their speech and language to communicate basic wants and needs, and even beyond that, thoughts, feelings, more complex information. And so a lot of times I think people will associate autism with behavior difficulties. And a lot of those behavioral, we call it behavioral dysregulation. They're dysregulated because they're frustrated. In their head, they know exactly what they want and why they want it that way, but because of the language component that is prevalent with autism, is that they just can't communicate that in the way that maybe we expect it, or in the way that we would understand it. And so that's where we get that frustration. And I understand that. If I couldn't communicate what I wanted, I would be really frustrated too. And then on top of that, there's a lot of sensory differences. And so the way that they're processing information, the way their body feels, the way their clothes feel, the way the noises are, the lights, things like that, any of those types of things can affect how they process their environment and process information. And for them to be overwhelmed and overstimulated can result in some of that dysregulation. And so it's not that they're a bad kid. It's not that they're throwing a tantrum. It's not a tantrum. They are doing the best they can to try to communicate what they need in that moment.
And I think you put it a really great way, because we have this language that we're speaking now, but they have their own language. So how, I guess, do you recommend people who maybe aren't from, maybe this is their first encounter with someone who has that difficulty, how should they respond?
I think, I try to follow some awesome parents of children with autism on social media and get the parents' perspective. I think that makes me softer as a clinician to recognize what the parents are struggling with. And so one of the things that I see frequently is their child is having a dysregulation in public, and the way that others are reacting and responding. And I can't imagine how isolating and how heartbreaking that would be as a parent to see other people looking at your child with judgment, or looking at you thinking it's because you're a bad parent. And it's not at all. Your child is having a moment where they're frustrated, and that's the way they know to communicate. And so I think I would challenge everyone who is listening and who is willing to kind of make some steps toward that, is when you see that, think about how you can be a helper. Maybe it's moving mom's grocery basket out of the middle of the aisle, or maybe it's giving her a smile and a pat on the back, or maybe it's just not judging, just recognizing in your head and in your heart how you're perceiving that situation, and thinking saying a prayer for that mom at that moment, because it's probably really hard for her. But however you're willing and equipped to help, being able and willing to jump in.
Great advice there. Great advice, because I'm sure we've all seen something or been around that situation, and we just didn't know. We just didn't know how to react. But that is phenomenal advice.
Oh, good.
She's just teaching us all kinds of things, folks, all kinds of things. So we talked a little bit about a lot, really. So tons of great information. So let's kind of go back to the therapy itself and the process, because it's not a cookie cutter type of situation. So that's one thing at Rehab, that y'all really tailor your services to the client. So kind of walk us through that a little bit.
So one of the catchphrases that a lot of people will say is, if you've met one child with autism, you've met one child with autism. Because they're never the same. They all have different strengths and weaknesses, and different backgrounds and families and things like that. And so one thing that I really love about West Texas Rehab is the facilities that we have. We have a sensory gym, and I know our facility flooded a little over a year ago, and so we've gotten all new facilities there. Our gym is super awesome, so we're able to help provide those children the sensory input that they need. Our occupational therapists are phenomenal at that. I ask them every day. I say, hey, I have a kid who has difficulty sitting still, or who has lots of sensitivity to loud noises, or has a difficulty transitioning into a big room. What do you suggest? Because that's their area of expertise. And so being able to work with them and have such great both working relationships and friendships with them, I'm able, I think, to provide better for my patients, because they can tell me, oh, I know that kid, he does well when you do this, or she really likes it when she gets this as a reward. And so being able to have these facilities where I can give them the sensory input they need while being guided by our awesome OTs who tell me how to do that, and then giving them a motivating activity, because a child's job is to play. So a child is not supposed to sit at the table for hours at a time. Their job is to play. And so if I'm doing therapy the right way, that is on the floor with toys that are motivating for them. And how can I put myself into their world and help them to communicate with me?
Great stuff. And well, so I want to pick up on some of the keywords that you said. So play and reward. And, you know, I think sometimes people may think of therapy as kind of a scary, bad, you know, type of a thing. But what would you say to, you know, anyone out there, to parents or guardians, that it's clicking now? Like, oh, it can be a positive, fun thing.
I have actually had several parents who come out of their first therapy session and they're like, so you just play with them the whole time? I'm like, yes, I do. It's purposeful play, but I do play with them the whole time. And so, you know, with their job being in play, they're going to get the most age-appropriate language through playing. And so if I have a kid at a table and we're doing something very, very structured, and it's something that I want to do, like, oh, put this coin in the box, or, you know, something like that, that's not meaningful to them. I want to find toys that they want to play with. And so if I have a kiddo who loves cars, I'm going to play with cars, and we're going to have vocabulary like car please, or go, or stop, or crash, being able to imitate some of the play. So if I'm making the cars go and they crash, and then the child does that, that tells me that they're watching me, they're processing what I'm doing, and then they're making themselves imitate that. And that early imitation, even just in play, you have to have that before your language can build on it. And so with a child with autism, imitating is really hard for them. And so if they're able to imitate something that I do in play, whether it's dropping a ball, or whether it's making cars crash, or whether it's jumping up and down, or whether it's jumping into the ball pit, all those fun things, if they imitate me, I'm like, check, they've got that skill, we can move on to something harder.
So there's a science behind all the play.
There is. So even though I just look like I'm having fun all day, I am having fun, but I'm also doing work, I promise.
That is amazing. Well, Anna, I mean, wow, there's just so much information in this one single webcast, and we sure appreciate you for coming on and telling us about it. Do you have any final thoughts or messages that you want to share?
I think that if you have those concerns, never, ever, ever feel like you can't voice those concerns. Voice them to, if your child is in therapy, voice them to us. If your child is not in therapy, let their pediatrician know, hey, something just doesn't feel right, and ask for those referrals. You are your child's best advocate. So you I tell parents, ask for what you want, and don't give up till you get it. So
she's just got so much good advice. We should just have an advice with Anna.
Oh,
how about
goodness.
that?
I don't know about that.
Well, I think so. I mean, wow. Again, thank you so much for coming on and telling us about all this.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Of course. We'd love to have you back anytime. So put it on your calendar. Hey, folks, and put the next episode of 411 with West Texas Rehab on your calendar. That's all the time we have for right now, but we'll see you next time. Have a great day.
Thank you.